All right, good morning, everyone. It is November 22nd, 9:30 a.m., and I call this meeting to order. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Approval of consent agenda, A, B, and C. We can do that together, right? I ask you every time. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Aye, or
Okay.
yes.
All in
Second.
favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All right, approved. All right, we are going to open the floor to member comments. If you sign.
Oh, we already did that?
Yeah, and we're switching. Oh, I shouldn't make mention to you after member comments, on your sheet, it says director's report. Mr. Terry Steelman is joining us today, and he has a few words to discuss with us in regards to ARC. So we're going to put Terry in that number 4 slot, which changes the numbers 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 down the entirety of the page. Did everyone get an agenda here? Okay, is there anyone? I see Jerry is signing up, so we'll let him speak. And then, Dora, do we have anyone in the waiting room?
Is Joe?
Joe's on. Joe's here.
We don't have anyone raising their hand to speak or anything. Would anyone who's online like to speak?
Okay, Jerry, did you want to, if you could go up to that podium there. Good morning, Jerry.
How are y'all? Can I move this a little bit? Just don't knock it off like a cat.
Just don't walk it over you.
Yeah, for this, my primary concern or talk is, and I think that what's been brought before y'all is this 40% disturbance, the 6 foot, the 4 foot, the numbers that have been put out there in the last, I'd say year or so, just to kind of, maybe more than that, but in the last year or so that I've been paying attention. And I just want to say this, I mean, me and Terry have had this conversation. The guidelines certainly can be vague. I used to sit beside Kent. I'd have a question. It wasn't in the guidelines. I'd ask Kent. So I understand that there may be some confusion out there, and pulling the Kent card is not my deal. He's gone. So obviously we got to be able to work with what we have here. So, but when it comes to this rule here, I've been told that it's always been this way. It's always been this 6 foot rule, this 40% disturbance, this, that, and the other. And to be honest with you, I kind of went, well, let me look in the guidelines, and I see you don't have to put it up there, but I printed something out that y'all have in front of you, and it says, okay, here's the design guidelines for the 27th edition. And if you look through there, you'll see probably 8 or 10 instances of disturbance, 40% under grading, under clearing, under this, that, and the other. So I'm like, looking at this going, okay, that's a pretty compelling argument that this 40% is something that, maybe I missed. I don't know, maybe some over the 25, 30 years I've been here, I've missed this stuff. So I decided, well, let me do a little more research. So I went to the 26th edition and I'm getting all the same stuff, 40%, and I understand disturbing. I understand not, wanting to protect the island. It's a beautiful island. Terry had last time I think I was in a meeting with Terry, he did describe beautifully this island, how it's fantastic. 40 years developed by the Mitchells. If they didn't have the resources to do it, this could have been a Myrtle Beach type island, and it's not. It's unique to the United States, actually. So, something I think has been done pretty right. So you go to the 26th edition and you look through and you see the same stuff. You go to the 25th edition and you'll see all this same stuff. Now, this is a matter of about 2 or 3 years at the most these editions have come out. I might have the dates on some of them. So I got to think, well, maybe I've just misread this thing. I know historically it was under grading that it was the question that initially came up with the 40%. And historically, we've always said, hey, whatever you leave on the ground when you walk away, it has to be under 40%. That's the way it was interpreted from when we first had this conversation about the 40%. And I'll be honest with you, when I called Ken on this, and there's a letter in here from Ken. When I called Kent, I'm like, Kent, it says grading under 40%, and we didn't have the thing in front of us. And Ken was like, he kind of looked at me, and goes, and he didn't really respond to the 40%, but you could tell he was kind of confused. He goes, the 25% hems you in. You got the 25% impervious, and you got the 25% massing. He goes, but yeah, I mean, he sort of tiptoed around the 40. He did answer it, but he answered it kind of in the response. He kind of said, it's just historically always been what we leave on the ground that we consider in any of these 25% scenarios. So he tied that in with the 40%. So historically, we go out there, we do the work. The fence has always been so these crazy wildcat contractors don't throw stuff everywhere, because they will. And they still do when you put the fence out there. The fence was for us to say, hey, you have no excuse. We told you to stay out of there. Now you got to fix that. But when we walked away, the number we've always, or at least when I started doing the 40%, the number was, hey, what's on the ground? What will never, ever go away? The driveway, the cart barn, the house, and whatever else. And then there is sometimes you need actual real, what I call grading to keep the water on the side and stuff like that. I've never in any, and I've got, as you go down, you'll see, I've got 6 projects I have up there. 3 of them have been approved, and then I got 3 of them that I say they're in process. I put the numbers together real quick, sat down and kind of did the outline of what we would call traditionally what we consider the grading part of it. And then I did add in this 6 foot and the 4 foot. And you can see there's about a 15 to 20% disparity. It's down near the bottom. There's 15 to 20% disparity. And I'm like going, we were okay when it went through back then, but I've got 3 of them sitting here in process that I am stalled right now because it's not working. So you can see the differences in average of this. And these are just big figures that I'm getting just for talking purposes. Obviously, if we have something that we see is, according to the new interpretation, 50%, there are things that I can change from a design standpoint that could get us down a little bit. But on big numbers, if I go to see where it says A was approved and B and C are approved, you can see, and C is a big project. You can see that C actually went over even according to, if we stuck to the buildings and all the stuff that we truly disturbed, permanently. But saying all that, you can see the difference between these 2 at the very end. So in big number talk, if I come up to you and I have a house, and I'll just make these, I got a 2,000 square foot house, and I'm getting up at 52% with the disturbed percentage. Technically, I got to lose 10% somewhere, either in the driveway, I got to move closer, I got to squeeze the house in. I've got to do something, and I'm doing big numbers. Again, design, you can trick around it a little bit. So that's what the people that, I don't know if they're online now or whatever, if they've sent some letters in, that's what they're saying is like, we've never had even a concern with 40%. It really wasn't a thing until recently. So they can't build what we've been building for 35 to 40 years. So I'm sitting here thinking, is this going to be an argument about interpretation, something that's been there that we're going to come up and say, well, we've always done it this way. And we've had that talk. We've always done it this way. Well, this is different now. And don't get me wrong. The guidelines can be changed. Y'all can say anything you want to say in the guidelines. I've never, and I'm just going to put this out here since I'm standing in front of you. I have never, ever told anybody, do what you want to do. I'll cover you. Never. As a matter of fact, I've gotten so much trouble for people doing stuff. Somehow my name tied into it. I said, you do something you're not supposed to do, I'm going to charge you 5 times the amount to fix it because I'm getting dinged and I don't have time to do this stuff. But saying that, right now, according to the current interpretations that I don't agree with, I still tell people this is what we're going with because that's what they're saying right now. If you don't like it, go to the board and complain. That's up to you. So saying all this is just short of showing the ones that I had done previously to this. So I'm going down, and so I get down to pretty sure it's the 24th edition. And I'm going to go, okay, let me see what they said there. Let me see what they said. Because remember, this was an always, I've been told more than once, not by anybody in this room, but I've been told by more than once. It's always been this way. It's always been this way. Okay, maybe I missed something. So I went to the 24th edition, I believe that's in here. I believe it's the 24th.
Page number?
And this thing, I have no idea, but if you look in there, if you keep going down, there's a 27th, 26th, 25th, and then you'll go down to the 24th edition.
24?
Yeah, it says it on the front, one of the little front pages right here. In fact, you know what I did?
23rd.
You know what I did just for y'all? Because this is kind of cool. It's on one of those pages. I brought my little, I did give y'all a laser one time back in the day. I think Dora was here and nobody ever used it, but it's one of these. So that's the 24th?
Yes.
Okay. Go under that and you'll see the things that I highlight. It mentions grading. You keep going down on the review process right here. That's the question. I'm going to get up here so I can read it myself. Percentage of site review grade. If you go to the 25th, 26th, 27th, all of a sudden, out of the blue, there's a whole lot more added there. It will be 40%, la-di-da-di-da. It actually says, generally included only the building, the decks, and the driveways. You actually go online right now. As it is currently, there's a little question mark. You can hit that thing, and it says, generally this, which is generally how we've always interpreted it when we've had to do this 40%. But as you can see, the 24th, the 23rd, 22nd, I went back as far as I could. I only have so much archive to go to. This 40% just shows up now. I mean, the 10 or 12 hits, they're not in here. You don't find them in the 24th one, which was about 2021, maybe 2022. You don't find it in the 23rd. You don't find it in the 19th. So that tells me that I wasn't completely losing my mind because this really never was a thing when we went through this. So when it all came up, I really questioned myself, did I miss something? You know, it's a big guideline. There's a lot of changes. And again, I am not saying y'all can't change it. Change it all you want. But you cannot say it's always been this way. So this is new to the builders and the people that are complaining about this. This is like, we've never seen this. That's true. I mean, the last 3 years they may have seen it, but there's a lot of time between designing and starting to build and stuff like that. So my point here is to say this, and if you can go down a little bit further down, maybe to the last page. I got a couple of questions that I've asked in one of the meetings previously. If you're going to do the 6%, and I've asked this with the 50% rule, and I've asked it with the windows, I said, put it in there. Put it in there so there's no question. So I'm not telling my people who can read plain English, yeah, it's not there. Yeah, it's a good idea to be 6 foot from the house. If you're going to work around the house, I have no problem with that. In fact, one of the things I just showed you, one of the properties that I did, I actually have it like 10 feet from the house in places because there's trees and stuff I'm trying to go around and I'm trying to give people room to work. I have no problem with the 6 foot because if you put it against the house, they're going to go in the woods, they're going to throw their ladders out there and they're going to look at you and say, you didn't give me enough room to work. No problem with that. But I do have a problem. I think most owners and most owners of the property have a problem by saying, you're telling me I've got to now have an imaginary 6 foot. When I say imaginary, fence is going to go away. Imaginary 6 foot that's going to eat into my potential on how big of a house I can build. And let's just say you have to take a bedroom or two off. If you're a renter, that's $2,000 a week if you're in the right place. So there's a real financial cost there. So what I'm telling the board is, if you decide you want to stay with this, fine, I'll work around it. I can do it. But you can't, after this meeting, say it's always been there. And you can't say, well, we didn't know or we don't understand. Because it is, I was confused and I'm in the business. I don't know what y'all do individually. I was kind of like, yeah, I don't know. So a few more things on this 40% and this 6 foot that I do have questions on that people have asked me and I've kind of collated in my head. First of all, you got the 6 foot. I've asked previously, being jokingly maybe a little smart, but is this holy ground? Are there burning bushes talking to me in this? Do I take my sandals off in this 6 foot? And the reason I'm saying this as a metaphor, you're eating real cost and real value up. Is this something that's forever? Well, I've never got an answer. Obviously, it's not, at least as it is, because eventually pull that fence up, go down the road a year from now, nobody knows. The bushes have grown back. So either I think the board needs to say, if we're going to keep this 6 foot, hey, you people that bought land, you've just lost this potential. I say that with an asterisk because if you say, oh, no. Once you pull it up, it doesn't matter. Okay, now I'm back down to, those smaller numbers I had in here when I did that little chart, the 32%, the 48%. So once I pull that 6 foot up, I'm technically back to 32%. Now, again, this 40% is new to the last 2 or 3 revisions. I'm back down to 32%. So the owner comes to me next year, hey, how's my 25% impervious? Well, I guarantee you, you're not going to be over 25% impervious because this 40% pretty much hems you in unless you got a huge driveway. How's my 25% massing? You know, you're probably fine. You're good. Hey, how about my 40%? Well, crazy enough, you got 10% left because they've taken the fence up. Oh, okay. Well, can I add to it? Certainly. You could add that room you couldn't have got last year. Let's put this bad boy in. And as a little math question, unless they let us go over the 40%, every time I add something, I can approach the 40%. Remember, I'm putting the 6 foot out there. So if you say 10%, let's say 10% is 1,000 square feet that I've got left. Well, I can put 1,000 square foot building there because guess what? This 6 foot I got to throw in there now. So I'm back down to 500 square feet. I put that in, get the sign off, walk away. Then they go, do I have any more left? Oh yeah, you still got some left. Can I put more on it? Got 500 left. Throwing numbers out just to make a point. Okay, can I put that? Well, you can't get all that because we're gonna do the 6 foot or whatever we do. You know what I'm saying? You never actually get the 40%. So it's sort of a crazy scenario. Second of all, the 25%, which is impervious and building mass, once you hit that number, it is forever. Once I get there to that 25% of my house or the mass, whichever one or both of them, and as a side note, they pretty much traditionally line up. You're pretty much not, I've violated one, I say violated, I've gotten over one and had to tweak the other, but generally they track pretty good. They track pretty good. If you know what, you know what the massing, I'm speaking of here, the impervious of the massing, kind of got an idea? Okay, they generally track. Once you get there and you walk away, you come back next year, hey, Jerry, can I put something on here? No. Not unless you tear up your driveway and put it in a pervious driveway. In other words, they're numbers that once you get there, it's done. This 40% is always a kind of a moving target that you never get to. That personally, I understand wanting to kind of keep things hemmed in on this island, but we've had 40 years of development. This is a beautiful island, and these rules weren't in there. This rule wasn't in there. So if you're going to consider it as a board, I say be ready to stand up and take the heat, because if I'm an owner and you told me I can't do this, I'm going to be a little tight about it. Second of all, if you're going to keep it, I think a good compromise would be, let's do the 6 feet, but at the end of the day, not as part of landscaping. This is part of what you will do. Have some kind of thing like you're going to seed it in. You're going to rake it out. You're going to do something. Obviously, we're not tearing big trees out of this 6 foot. It's usually the underbrush and stuff you have to work around. Maybe that's a good compromise, but don't use that 6 foot as knocking these houses down by an average of maybe, I'm just saying big numbers, 10 to 15%. I know there was a project that came through. I got a call from the guy. And this is when it became kind of real to me. Like, wait a minute, this is a real thing. Project came through last minute. According to this guy, I wasn't there. Last minute at the final, they said, oh, by the way, you're over the 40%. What are you talking about? Yeah, you're over the 40%. If I remember what he told me correctly, he had to take a bedroom out downstairs, move one upstairs. He lost about, he said 200 to 300 square foot on that house. He said he was shocked that the owner still wanted to do the house. Now that means you have to go back to the design. You have to tweak it again. You got to pay that amount too. The owner still wanted a house because he wanted to live on this island because he loved this island. So he did it. Well, of course, the builder lost his $500 a heated square foot to build it. The owner lost a bedroom or so, according to this guy. And then he had a guy on the hook for another project. And the guy said, this is crazy. Sold his property and left. He said, I'm not going to deal with this. So there's ramifications, all these things. Again, I don't think anybody has any evil intent when they go out and do this, but I think there's just a domino effect. And my biggest point here is to say, it was just inserted 2 or 3 revisions ago. There was nothing. There wasn't even a hint at it, not even under grading. All it says is keep it to a minimum. It was inserted whole cloth. It wasn't actually instituted in the first revision or the second revision ago. That's when it started getting hinted at. And now it seems to be a full-blown, this is how it is. So again, to boil this down, the thing I'm saying is, hey, if you're going to own it, own it. tell them you're taking the 6 foot and you're gonna own it, and good luck and see where that goes. I mean, I'd be tight about it. Maybe there's a good compromise. Nobody has a problem with that I've ever talked. They're like, hey, we don't ever leave it like a desert anyway. I do have one more question actually after this. But that ties into that. Third of all, well, I think that's two. The question I have is this, that people have asked me. I thought it was a clever question. Hey, if I've got to eat that 6 foot up, and we were having a conversation, this came out. If I got to eat this 6 foot up, it's the same square footage that we're dealing with that's under my house, that's under my garage, it's under my driveway, right? Yep. And nothing could grow there, can it? Nope. Yeah, hopefully not under your house. Well, wouldn't that be kind of funny if I just made a desert 6 foot off of my house, 4 foot off of my driveway? What could they say? I said, well, technically, they'll say something. But you got a point, because that same 6 foot is the same square footage, is the same that's under that house. It would be kind of funny, kind of smart, kind of clever to do that. And when they go, what in God's name have you done? Hey, that's my 6 foot. That's the 6 foot you made me lose. I can do what I want with my 6 foot, just like I can in my house. Now I'm being clever about that. But that's the questions that come up. So I think it's causing more concerns. I do think there's a way, maybe a compromise to address this issue and make sure that when they walk away, it doesn't look like just junk around the house. And most people, most owners that I've ever dealt with, once the house is built, they've never called up and said, hey man, I'm talking about for the 6 foot rule. I'm talking about just the general, a good contractor will make sure that house looks good. His name's on that thing too. So that's 6 foot. So that's the point of, at least of this meeting.
Can you wrap up pretty
Sure,
quick?
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done with that.
Oh, you are? Okay. And I just want to explain to everyone the reason I've let Jerry go over. The board can find it in their files that there were several builders, and instead of Jerry made a presentation and wanted to speak, and the other builder simply wrote letters, and you'll find them. So I gave him their minutes. So
I didn't even know there was a time frame. So
thank you.
thank you.
Jerry, we appreciate it, and the time you put into showing us that presentation. So,
We have letters from 4 builders.
yeah,
Okay. Is that going to go into the public exhibits for the minutes of the meeting?
so Dora has attached them all, so we can make them part of the minutes. That way we know. Good, thank you for that. I'm not gonna mention the builders' names. I don't need to. It's board privy, so that's fine. Now in response, we also have Terry, who's once again taken his time to come out and speak to us. Unless we have any other member comments. Has anybody come online?
No, I just had someone ask to share the presentation. That's it. And I did.
Dick and Pat, anything today? No. Okay, so we're able to close down member comments then at this time and move on to Mr. Terry Steelman, who's once again giving his time to us, and we appreciate it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Terry Steelman. I am chair of ARC B, and I'm here really to try to help bring some clarity to some of these issues. Back in October, at the October board meeting, I made a commitment that I would do a little investigation into this, and actually this issue of the 60% undisturbed area and the associated 6 foot construction limits. I've done a lot of analysis and review of this specific topic, and was prepared to make a specific proposal as to how to deal with it. But in light of, some of the recent development and the notion that there might be a specific proposal coming forth to the board, stopped short of making that exact proposal based on the conversation that Russ and I had about a proposal that's coming forth. Today, I'd like to suggest to the board that I believe it's a dangerous precedent for the board to override an ARC guideline without a specific proposal coming from the ARC, which has been the historic process by which guidelines are modified. Both ARCs come together, make proposed recommendation to the board for ARC modifications. I don't know what the covenants specifically say, but my sense is that the process has been one where ARC reviews the guidelines, makes suggested proposals, and then the board either adopts them or not adopts them, and thus the various versions of the guidelines. I believe there is a simpler solution to this problem, short of a nuclear option of the board overriding the ARC guidelines. And what could come from that. After reviewing and revisiting what I believe those guidelines are intended to do, I think there are three primary things that the 60% rule was set forth to manage. One was to protect, the sites from being clear cut for development, which is a really important thing in this kind of maritime climate that we live in. To maintain as much natural vegetation as possible on construction sites, undisturbed, and to also ensure the houses are appropriately scaled to the lot and their adjacent neighbors. Those were the primary purposes for the 60% rule in the first place. The 60% rule, and there's an aspect of what Jerry said that I concur with. The 60% rule, as defined in the guidelines, stated as a, quote, general rule that may vary in application based upon the lots, where lots greater than the larger lots, which are lots greater than 10,500 square feet, and smaller lots may have different considerations. This hasn't come up a lot in ARC-B. It's come up more in ARC-A, in part because in Cape Fear Station in particular, there are other limiters that drive the development other than this 60% rule. I think that, let me also acknowledge, I believe in recent years, we have been more, we've seen this rule more as a black and white application, as opposed to what I believe its intent was, and it's even stated as a general rule, not a black and white rule. And I believe we've been applying it, and I've evaluated this more, black and white. And I think that is trying to just not have a degree of ambiguity. And I respect the way the staff has tried to interpret that. But I believe it has contributed in part to the conflict that we are now trying to navigate. In Cape Fear Station, a lot of that doesn't exist because, you've got specific limitations on every single lot, and they're very, very particular to very specific lots. But in the rest of the island, it's a little more ambiguous. The rest of the island, the guidelines for what can be built on a site are generally understood to be 30%, probably driven more by covenant than guidelines. But there are these ambiguities. I went through and evaluated a number of applications, none of which are in my section of ARC. I looked at ARC A versions. I'm very familiar with the ARCB, and we really haven't run across this so much in B. But I can tell you three applications in particular that I looked at. 2 Coates Court, which I know this has been an issue for, 120 North Bald Head Wine, and 11 Colonel Red. I think is it right? Site. The part that's interesting and part of what I learned through this is that, you know, some of these are average size lots. The first 2 are average size lots. And the last one is a smaller lot. Part of what is playing out here is, you know, I believe that the specifics of each site haven't fully been evaluated and considered, but none of these sites are getting to exceeding the 30% of the lot coverage. So I think that what I would suggest to the board is, rather than you know, taking a sledgehammer to this situation, that we as the ARCs, A and B, go back and really look at what was the intent of this guideline and look at these sites more to the particulars of that site, which really means, you know, evaluating the natural vegetation on the site, the size of the lot, the size of the house that's trying to be developed on that lot, the extent of decks and pools, and then the adjacent properties. I think if the ARC starts to look at those in more specific terms, I believe we can get through this conflicted period to a point where we can deal with all of this, as I've suggested in the past, in a more holistic reevaluation of the guidelines. And so I guess my point today is I would compel the board to not override the current guidelines, give us the responsibility to manage this appropriately, which I believe we will and can, and then let's deal with the specifics, as I've committed in the past, when we really evaluate how to repackage the guidelines next year. You know, I've gone through and I've already started really thinking about how the guidelines have morphed to a degree of confusion and started to set up a format by which I think they can be organized, where things like, you know, all of these factors, some of which Jerry mentioned, that drive the development of a house: heated square footage, impervious, you know, the house footprint, the 60% undisturbed, the 40% grading, limits of construction, 50% rule. All of these are interlocked, and they all drive what can be done on any given lot. None of them stand alone, but part of what has happened is the way they are organized in the guidelines, people get confused as the relationship between each of these. You know, we're not so confused by them, but I can appreciate why somebody is confused by them. And I think there's a way to clarify this. I guess I'm asking for the board to be disciplined and patient. Let us manage it and not set what I characterize as a dangerous precedent of having the board tell the ARC what the ARC rules should be. And with that, I'll stop and ask if there are any questions for me.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know what dangerous precedent we're about to engage with.
I don't think
Um,
we're planning to.
I would like to make a broader suggestion, and it comes about as a result of reading these letters and many other letters. I mean, there have been letters that have come in during the course of the year that I've been able to read because it relates to the art process. And I kind of say, Jerry, thank you for coming, and the comments we've had I've kind of had an aha moment that says, should we, I mean, it has been decades that we've been building, and as you've indicated, Terry, now that we are utilizing different lots and smaller lots and, all of a sudden issues that were not issues before. It's not maybe that the guideline wasn't there. It's just, it was never a negative issue because the lots were big. Is it time for us to, for instance, take the output that came out of the contractors meeting? They had a number of comments about changes they'd like to see in the process, whether it's communication, whether it's a digitization of the actual forms, whether it is actually looking at the guidelines in their current format and saying, is this the best, most readable document we got that presents to people? And quite frankly, I would take it beyond the ARC. I think it's a process that needs to be looked at. And I think the ARC has certain knowledge to add into it. I think the contractors who have to execute it have certain observations that need to be in it. And I think that then we as a board can facilitate a broader discussion of how do we bring the guidelines into our current, 21st century situation.
I
Make
think,
it a project.
yeah, I think Terry is speaking to that. And I will tell you that builders meeting with the architects, it was eye-opening. And I think we learned a lot. And that's, I believe, part of what Terry was just saying. He had begun working on, this is not a quick project, what he's working on. And he's trying to do it quickly. So I think we all feel the same way. We're all good with trying to, what Terry said, it makes so much sense. These lots, the remaining lots, most especially in A, are, think about it, they're the lots that people didn't pick first.
Yeah.
Right. They're not the best lots. They're not the easiest to work with. So basically, he's saying we can look at things a little bit of a different way. It's kind of I thought this a long time ago. Sometimes you gotta look, touch, feel, and you may be able to make some judgment calls. And I think that's a little of what you're speaking to.
And I think there's good precedent here. And for those of us that have been around a long time, Cape Fear Station used to be universally 30% of the lot size across the board. This was back in 2004, 2010. There were lots that if you limited the lot to 30%, they were so small you couldn't build the minimum size house required by guidelines. So which was 1,600 square foot house. You couldn't even, so which basically meant those lots could never be built on. So, this is probably 2007 or 8, 10 maybe. There was an advocation to change that percentage on those lots to be able to deal with the fact that these were small lots. Many of those have now been built on without a lot of conflict. So I think there's precedent for how to deal with this. I think we have to apply it to the current condition that we're dealing with now.
But the issue,
I'd like to make a comment basically supporting what Terry is saying. My wife and I first built a home on a big but very narrow lot on Dowager. And there was no way, it basically, one end of the house sat on top of the fort wall. The other end was down basically at sea level. And there was no way that even the sides of the house on this narrow lot could have been painted or maintained, or the siding could have been put on if there had been a rigid adherence to the 6-foot limit. The ladders just were so long and so high, you had to go back further than that. The ARC at the time looked at it, said, sure, we understand the problem. Don't cut down any big trees. don't destroy the natural vegetation, and try to restore this part to the way it was. And that was the individual treatment that was required by probably a third of the lots, well, all of the lots that are between Dowager and the seventh hole on the golf course. And it worked. It worked well. Nobody tried to limit the house. We had a 4-bedroom home. Everybody was happy. And I think that was the intent of the guidelines back at that point when they were only about, as I recall, 21 pages long.
Yeah, and that, I think that kind of speaks to what Terry was saying about, you know, again, I'll tell you what I call it, a guidebook for dummies. And it's just easier to read. And that, I think that would be my goal, is to get something smaller and more concise and easily understood.
And let's understand the thing that may be driving this is, yes, the absence of the larger lots, but also who wants to build a small square footage home when the public wants 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 feet on a lot size that isn't going to change? And that's, that's the reality. I mean, we were, the home that we built that I was talking about was, I think, 400,000. The last one we sold went for well over 3 million.
Yeah. One other thing I guess I'd like to say about this is, as we are staffing up the ARC and getting back to the staffing level that we have in the budget, I think we need to consider having a person whose job it is to work with the homeowners and the builders on submissions to make sure at the beginning, I mean, they understand how to do it. And I'll just share my experience. It's years ago when Karen Mosteller was here. I was doing a minor renovation. And basically at that point, I went to Karen. I said, what do I do? And she gave me, 30 seconds of instruction. I was like, okay, I can do that. And I produced, I took 2 years of engineering drawing. So I produced my own drawings with the appropriate dimensions and submitted them. Not everybody's going to be able to do that, but having someone who can quickly, without having to read the entire guidelines, someone who can help a homeowner understand what they need to do to get a successful submission into the ARC. I think that kind of position would pay for itself in spades. Chris Howard, when she was here, sort of did that, but she was so busy, frankly, she didn't really have time to, spend an hour with somebody most times. I think we need to think about that as we are getting back to our budgeted staffing level with the ARC.
I just wanted to make a follow-up comment. That certainly would be part and parcel of what I hope the board might consider as a project for 2025, which is to really look at our process, to look at how we resource it, to look at our customer focus, which I think a facilitator would certainly help, and also to apply support to the ARC as we try and, I would suggest, revamp what our guidelines are in terms of readability, understanding, how do we train people on them. And the one aspect that I don't think we have our hands around yet is we have developed a sense of friction between builders and the ARC. We know it because we see negative comments. And my question would be, as we go to this very specific issue, which is a hot topic for the building, should there be some builder resource that works with the ARC to come up with a mutually well understood and acceptable solution? I mean, we never quite
So
get to
Betty, I
that
think
customer
we
focus.
started that with the session we had in this room
Right,
back in, I think it was August, that I think was beneficial to all. We didn't completely agree on everything, but I think that dialogue was constructive. So.
and moving forward, when we're trying to come up with guidelines, come up with wording, come up with interpretations, maybe having a representative or two from the building community as part of that would help start to build that bridge.
We're
That's
gonna
just my
continue
suggestion.
that. That's gonna be an ongoing thing, and we're, there
Can
is
I-
some. Go ahead,
Can I
Paul.
say a couple things? It's like deja vu all over again. I joined the board 2 years ago. This was the issue. We spent an entire year, which I sat in on every meeting, redoing the guidelines. Harry and Jennifer Russell went to all the meetings, and I went to all the meetings. I'm not sure anyone else did. We've been through this. To rewrite the guidelines, the same thing we did 2 years ago. And then we spent a year, and we approved it. And everyone was happy with it, including at least two people in that room. So I don't understand, is every 2 years we're going to say this is terrible, spend a year and then do two? We just did this. Secondly, I'm glad, Terry, you looked at 3 spots, but the problem is we've looked at it closely. ARC, we have been talking about this for since the spring, I think April, for one lot in particular. In fact, Maddie, you did an entire audit of the process. We've done the audit. We've done all the things you described. We also have a process that is completely arbitrary. While Two Coots Court is being told they can build on 30%, 9 Morning Warbler, approved in one meeting, is built on 49%. So I know we wring our hands and talk about how difficult it is by lot, how things should be. It obviously has a lot to do, not with the lot, but with the property owner. So we shouldn't pretend that this is a diligent process. Depending on who you are, seems to be how you get this rule imposed. Thirdly, you've got a rule. People have bought property. People have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars on lots. They read the rule says 40%. So for this board to decide it's no longer 40%, puts us in a pretty dangerous place. They purchased a lot under a set of rules. And we, as has been proposed, arbitrarily gets to change the size of the house. We're not talking about design. We're talking about the size of the house, which is, I don't know, 4 bedrooms to 3, 5 bedrooms to 4, whatever it is. You're probably talking about $500,000-$600,000 decrease in value because we don't like the size of the house, even though the rules we have and have had for 30 years had the 40%. So we're just sort of playing a game here to go, oh, we worked so hard on this. If we had more staff, maybe we could do this correctly. No, we got the staff. We take 6 months to approve or not approve these things. We're just talking at each other. We need to provide clarity to our property owners. The property owners are pissed off, and rightly so. And this needs to be cleared up and cleared up today. So finally, somebody said the board can't, forget the exact words, that the board, arbitrary, I don't forget that it's not the board's role, it's the ARC's role. That's just not true. The board is the one who decides, makes these decisions, not the ARC. They're an advisory committee. And in fact, they've been working on this for a while, and we still don't have a proposal. So I think we ought to move forward with the proposal today, put it up for a vote and approve. We can either clarify these issues for the ARC and then have the ARC follow the rules rather than decide who gets to build what based on which architect or how nicely you treat the staff. That's not how you run a good operation. Thanks.
Paul,
One comment that I would make is you use the word rules at least 6 times in your comments. Keep in mind that the ARC, they're ARC guidelines. Guidelines must be interpreted. Rules are black and white. And there has always been pretty much there has been fundamental agreement that we need guidelines, not hard and fast rules. Contractors want hard and fast rules, especially when they can be stated to their advantage.
Well, Joe, that might be, you're, and I should have said guidelines. It's not contractors, it's property owners. Ultimately, it's the property owners that are the ones that are, especially property owners who bought property under a guideline and then have those guidelines changed or not proposed. And you know what, Joe? I think you're right. If there had been any consistency in how these guidelines are interpreted, you hire the right person, you get approved one meeting, and you get to build whatever the hell you want. You hire the wrong person, takes 6 months, you have to appeal to the board. It's the guidelines are arbitrarily interpreted, and that's not right.
Paul, you saying that the guidelines are being arbitrarily interpreted multiple times does not make it true.
Okay.
And you don't have evidence of this, and you're alleging corruption, and I think you ought to stop it.
I'm not alleging any corruption. I'm just
Yes,
telling
you
you what
are.
happened. I'm not alleging any corruption. I'm alleging favoritism. Favoritism and corruption, John.
Yeah, it is. It's the same thing, Paul.
No, they're not.
Okay. So,
okay,
look,
John, why don't you listen? Explain to me how in one meeting, 9 Morning Warbler got approved at about 50% of the lot size.
and we've been through this about 5
No,
times.
we've
No,
never
I
been
will
through it.
explain it. I will explain it.
No one's ever explained to me with that number of 49% there, the ARC approved it. I do know why, because most of the ARC didn't show up.
Okay, so we've been through this, but I'll go through it again. So the overage, the number being higher than it should have on the
49%.
Square footage.
49%.
I don't accept that's the right number. I don't remember what it is.
That's what Carrie Moffett said. It was 49%.
Okay, I don't accept that's correct because you tend to pull up numbers that you can't justify. But let me go ahead, okay? We went through this. What happened was it was noted in the initial review that there was an overage on the square footage. An email was sent to the architect saying, hey, you need to tighten up your limits of construction, words to that effect. The staff failed to follow up because they were so busy. And by the way, Paul, one of the comments you made was we have plenty of staff. We have exactly one ARC staff member here today who was also here 6 months ago because all the rest of them resigned. Okay. So no, we don't have adequate staff. We have never staffed up to the budgeted level since the positions were authorized, either because there was a delay on hiring or because people resigned. Okay. So to say we have plenty of staff is simply not true. All right. So if you have 220 submissions, let me finish, Paul. You asked.
Okay.
Let me finish. If you have 220 submissions in a year. Will somebody make a mistake? Yeah, I think so. I think you'd make a mistake. I think anybody would make a mistake handling 220 submissions in a year. So your allegation that this is corrupt and arbitrary is simply, you're just feeding the fire because that's what you want to do.
John, my comment about staff was about the 40%. If the number is easily calculated, and if
It is not easily calculated. Have you ever tried doing it? I got an
No.
engineering degree and I tried doing it, and it's very difficult.
I have no idea, it doesn't, nobody on the staff ever said they can't calculate it, so. That my point was, we are going, this is Groundhog Day, this is silly, we've been dealing with this for 2 years now, or whatever. It's November, so I've been on the board 22 months. This is the issue back in January. We put together a group. We put together a group to rewrite the guidelines. And to Betty, your point, we had a contractor on the committee and was involved. And so all the things that you said we need to do, we did. And that's were cleaned up. We included contractors. We obviously included property owners. And here we are again. So let's take another year and do the thing we did 2 years ago. I don't know how. I mean, it is a whole idea just to have this bureaucracy just go around and around and around and do the same thing over and over. Sounds like it.
Paul, I don't agree with all of your comments relative to that.
Well,
I
you
would
weren't on the
say-
board. You weren't on the board. We weren't on the board when we did that 2 years ago.
Excuse me. One of the activities was you referenced an audit that I did of our process. It was not aimed at process efficiency, but I can tell you that in that report I produced, there are a number of recommendations, and they focused on things like communication, they focused on timeliness, they focused on education, they focused on tracing, and none of them have been discussed by this board or adopted. The fact that we are still in this situation says that we probably haven't done it right. We're probably not following up right. And I do think it's worth continuing to try and improve a process that we all acknowledge is difficult to maneuver. We're all here to try and make this a better experience for members who are trying to build, for contractors who are trying to work here, and for staff that is trying to do their job.
Betty,
And
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. The process isn't working, but to take another year to rewrite guidelines, include property owners and builders, which is what we did all of 2023 with the board approval at the end of 2023. I don't think is the answer in 2025.
Well, I don't think
the guidelines were completely rewritten. And so
I'm
now
not
you
saying
want to
rewrite
rewrite
the
the guidelines again?
I'm not saying rewrite the guidelines. I'm saying look at the process and also look at the byproduct, the guidelines. I'm not saying spend time rewriting rules and guidelines. They're there.
I'm okay with all that, but we need to have some clarification on the guideline that is causing a problem, that is inconsistently applied. I won't use arbitrarily. I'll just say inconsistent.
It's the process. You are alleging things are inconsistent and arbitrary. They're not. Process breakdown.
I withdrew the word arbitrary. I'll use inconsistent. And it is obviously inconsistent because some people get 30% approved, some people get 49% approved.
You say it's obvious because you found one example which has been explained to you. So that's not obvious. So, and the other thing is
no, that's not true. It is. It's a fact. It's inconsistently applied.
It's a fact. Why? Because you say so? You don't have evidence.
If it's approved at 49%,
You have one example that you've talked about 8 times.
Because no one's ever explained to me who screwed it up.
Yes, it has. It's been explained to you. You apparently can't absorb the explanation.
Who screwed it up? Tell me who made the mistake. Normally, when people make mistakes of that magnitude in organizations,
They don't work here anymore. What does it matter? Because you ran them off.
who was it? I don't even know. I don't even know who it was. No one's ever told me.
That's not constructive.
Yeah, I think we need to avoid personal attacks here. That's not advancing the discussion.
Paul is personally attacking the staff, saying that they are making decisions arbitrarily that favor one architect over another. That's what he's saying.
John,
I'm pushing back on that.
I went through the word arbitrarily. I'll say inconsistently. How about that?
What is clear is that we have obviously an issue, or we wouldn't have been spending this much time discussing it and arguing over it. And yes, we have guidelines in place for preservation reasons. Those guidelines we're supposed to advance the purpose of the ecology and building on the island and and I'm not a big fan of the word vernacular, but that is one that's much utilized, and I think those have been largely successful over time. We are in a situation where, with the rewrite of some of those guidelines and the application by the ARC and both the employees and the committees, that there has been today talked about a lot of dissatisfaction with that process. Dissatisfaction due to delays, dissatisfaction due to interpretations, and certainly the ARC has and should have the power and the ability to interpret these guidelines. As Joe points out, they're not hard and fast rules, but I think that there has been some interpretation of that has given rise to a lot of concern among homeowners and property owners and those who seek to build, as well as the builders and the committee themselves. So inasmuch as there is ambiguity in the interpretation of those rules, inasmuch as there is as there are conflicts between some of those rules, and one of those that we've talked about both today as well as I think in 6 or 7 board meetings now, is the 60/40 rule and its impact upon the 6-foot setback. There is a role for the board. There is and the role that we have is to attempt to clarify and make those conflicts less ambiguous and resolve, if there is a conflict, some of those ambiguities. Because ultimately, if we approach this process with too much subjectivity, then we open up the association to a lot of risk, legal liability, and I think that in as much as if a builder or a homeowner can show that there has been application that has been not in keeping with those guidelines, or the interpretations have been very diverse and not consistent with one another, then those facts will form the basis of potential lawsuits here. So we need to be mindful that we are operating using guidelines, but we're also operating consistently within those guidelines, so that we can achieve results that are, along with the goal of the guidelines, have some uniformity and those consistencies. So I think that we should all be in agreement about that.
Are we in agreement that Terry needs to take this another step and give us a better understanding of how that interpretation can be applied in our current situation?
Well, I think that's a general statement, and the general statement is, yes, we do want to have the support of ARC. We want to have input. We want to have, if we're going to go ahead and review and revise the guidelines, that needs to be an ongoing process. And that's something that we should, appoint a group to do that and drive that forward. Meanwhile, as that is also ongoing, we have situations where we have current builds that are in progress that need to be addressed and need to be resolved. And so to the extent that those guidelines right now in their current state have ambiguity, then it is the role of the board properly to analyze that ambiguity and work to resolve.
I'm not so sure that there is ambiguity. I think there's a disagreement in interpretation. What I've heard in the past when people have come forward is that the guidelines have included written documentation on all of these so-called rules, but the way people put them together and interpret them has created differences of opinions. So I don't know that we can resolve that today, but I think that becomes the charge of this ARC to say, we now understand we've got a difference in interpretation and that they need to bring forward how we should approach it.
Well, but it's not the ARC's issue in and of themselves to resolve. It's
but to make a recommendation.
It's a larger group. And we're also obviously not going to resolve every issue, nor should we write, to use Joe's parlance again, nor should we be writing rules as opposed to guidelines. But we should be in a situation where we are, if there are things that are brought to us that are irreconcilable, then ultimately it falls on us to go ahead and reconcile it.
But I don't think that we have enough of that. I mean, we've had a presentation this morning that I think points it out. But in terms of saying, I mean, what are we talking about here? Is there something going on that in terms of what you're suggesting, or?
Well, I mean, I think that there's the general conversation. There's also a specific item that last month we talked about it and we said, we're going to go ahead and try to resolve this. The month prior, we said we're going to resolve this. And there should have been a proposed motion that has been circulated, and I hope it's been circulated to everyone.
It has not been circulated.
It has not been circulated.
That motion.
There was a motion that has been drafted and was designed to be circulated to the board to address one specific item, which was the 60-40 rule. And I think that is a matter that certainly something
that has not been circulated.
Now look in your inbox.
There is a proposal. We haven't seen it.
I find this process really objectionable. We are here as a board to work together, knowing that behind the scenes, people are dealing with issues, making proposals, suggesting that
I
just circulated.
I received that yesterday and I sent it to Dora.
It is, I don't care. I mean, we say we put the whole agenda and everything together well in advance of the board meeting.
This is an individual thought.
This is just a topic for discussion, review, consideration.
I think it needs to be brought to another meeting, and I really think that we as a board can do better. Come on, to submit something, to bring someone in for comments, to have done this behind the scenes and not circulated it and say, well, now we need to step in, I think is totally.
This week I received 3 letters from builders, one of them a brand new complainant. And I made sure those were all put in in the files to read. And, they didn't all come in here to read them out loud, but I get calls and emails and texts every single week. I've had this discussion with Terry every week. Just, within this year with the frustration some of these builders are having. Terry's helped me to why, to make it a little clearer to me why these things are being, why they're having the difficulties that they're having. He agrees that some change needs to happen. We're trying to get things done differently. However, we do have a staff that, we're rebuilding right now, but it's our job to read all of these things and to hear about it. And when, you know, you have architects and, builders that take their time to come in here to put together a little slide for us to look at, we do need to take it serious. And sometimes I didn't get these things until yesterday.
We take it very seriously.
Yeah,
I'm just
good.
saying, I think this board should have a process that involves all board members and a
Mhm.
process to deal with issues. Because you get letters is not the sole reason for all of a sudden a motion to obviously have been put together with input from some people, but not others, and then brought last minute into the board meeting.
Paul
saying-
had this. Paul, didn't you distribute this?
No,
Yeah, yeah, a couple of board meetings ago.
no.
No.
And
Is that Paul?
Okay, am I on mute?
Oh, you're on.
this is.
Betty, last month, we were talking about this and settling it last month. Terry offered to spend a month and come back to this meeting with a proposal. We don't have a proposal, so this, in absence of a proposal that we had a month ago, this is a resolution to solve this issue in the near term, which is causing conflict. And if you elect to spend another year looking at the guidelines, this proposal doesn't impact that in the least.
Paul.
And all it was
Paul,
was an attempt, because we didn't get a proposal, to put something on the table. And I think this will solve the issue that we're having day to day, because the solution to a problem is not another study and continued kicking the can down the road.
Paul, I'm gonna say that at the last meeting, we agreed that Terry would take a look at it, that he would assess it, and he would come back with a recommendation. I don't know how you went on with the assumption that, oh, there wouldn't be any recommendation, so we will do it ourselves.
What's the recommendation? What is the recommendation on the 40%?
Terry has already put it forward, and I'm not gonna discuss it again. We recognize that this is a bigger issue. And I will say.
The recommendation was to do nothing and study it some more. I don't think that's I mean, maybe, that makes some people feel good because we can have more meetings, but we've been at this for 7 months, and we just spin around and around and around, and we don't do anything. But I guess that's the BHA way.
Paul, can I state that it wasn't my recommendation to study it further. My recommendation was that the ARC be more disciplined about exactly how the guideline around the 60% was managed, such that it truly took into account the specific circumstance of each lot, which is, I think, our obligation. I think.
No, and Terry, and I think what has been written actually has that in there.
Yeah, the difference though, and I haven't seen it.
Okay, yeah, that's in the resolution.
Yeah.
I agree.
Which, by the way, I still haven't seen. Can someone send it to me? And to Joe?
Should have been sent to Joe, Paul,
Maybe refresh your email. Not you. No. Now, this was something remember seeing that looks like a restructure. Terry, did you?
Yeah, so the only other thing I was gonna say was, I was working toward a proposal, and I shared this with Russ when he shared with me that this was coming forth. And I, as I stated in my remarks, elected to not make a proposal. I don't find it constructive for ARC to be making specific proposals counter to board members' resolutions. I believe the process should continue to work through as it always has. ARC makes recommendations to changes in the guidelines, the board either adopts them or not. And that I remain in the position that should be the way this continues. I believe there's a solution to this short of this resolution, and I believe it's the better and more appropriate way to handle and address this circumstance. Any other circumstance akin to this that will likely begin to come up if the board takes the position that if they don't like a particular guideline, they can simply cherry pick it and override it, which I don't think is.
Do you have a copy of this?
I haven't seen it.
I didn't.
I've only had it.
It'll be in your email. Dora's sending it to you.
I understand the yes.
Yeah.
No, wait, until Terry, what you just described, this resolution doesn't do any of those things. It actually does exactly what you described. It clarifies what appears to be a conflict, and then gives the ARC obviously discretion based on the peculiarities of the lot. It doesn't change one word of the guidelines, doesn't change one word of any of that stuff. And you know, I don't mind spending another year again, trying to rewrite the guidelines again, but we should not put off this problem, which is a problem with our property owners, for another year. That's not a solution.
I mean, Paul, you're suggesting that this takes a year, and I disagree with that premise.
You said that you thought you could have some things worked out in the new year.
Exactly. And
I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about rewriting the guideline.
No.
Well, working at something more quickly than that is a great idea. It does not have any impact on this resolution, and this resolution has no impact on that happening as well. It is a very simple.
I would like to go on record as saying, I feel that the way this has come about is really objectionable to me as a board member, not being included and having an open discussion and just bringing it last minute to a meeting. Number two, I really question whether it is this board's role to bypass the ARC and their recommendations and say, we want to make a change to a rule. And three, I suspect the result of this is we are going to see submissions that have not fit the guidelines and have been discussed by this board more than once, come back, and guess what? They now get approved. And in my opinion, that is blatant favoritism. That's my feeling.
Well, Patty, as I for the third time, this does not change the guidelines in the least.
well,
Then it's not needed. If it's not changing the guidelines, then we don't need a new resolution.
Terry, what were you gonna say?
I think it by default does change the guidelines, which I don't think need to be changed. I think there is a framework by which this issue can be managed without the adoption of such a I think aggressive action here, and I just disagree with the process.
How does it change? How does it change the guidelines? There's nothing in it to change the guideline.
It does change it. It says that, for instance, you can go outside the 60, you can go outside your 40% as long as you restore it. That's not in the guidelines right now. It says that the 6 foot limits of construction shall not limit the size of the house that can be built. That is not the current practice. Just a couple of things.
You're right.
Now,
You're right.
it would be
You're
nice,
right.
it would be nice if this had been shared with the board members, 2-3 days ago, so that we could have completely digested it. But given the fact that this has just been dropped on us 5 minutes ago, I don't think I agree with Betty. I don't think it's appropriate for us to take this up. What might be appropriate is to send this to the ARC and let them look it over. And if you would like, I can.
The ARCs just spent a month on that, correct? That was what we charged the ARC. Were charged with doing last month.
John, that wasn't withheld. I only received this yesterday and basically myself just looked it over.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Christine, because you don't drop something like this on the board and then say, let's vote. That is just bad practice, as Betty has pointed out.
I think you make motions all the time.
No, we don't. Something like this it's covering of the look at it for 2 minutes and then vote. That is just wrong on the face of it.
You're right, John. We've only been talking about it 7 months. Why would we be ready?
I'm talking about this proposal, Paul. I'm talking about your proposal.
And this proposal is something along these lines we've been talking about for 7 months.
No.
And you're right. This is moving a little too fast, I guess. They will take 8 months or 9 months. Why don't we take a year?
Paul, nobody is suggesting we take a year, and you're doing your normal thing. So why don't you give that a rest? And why don't we let Terry come back and the ARC come back with a written proposal for the board, which is, by the way, what the covenants specify.
You know what, John? That's what we did last month. We said, let's let the ARC. Well, you might want to review the minutes. That's exactly what we said. And 1 month later, we're in the same place. There is no proposal.
I hate to do this. We've got to take a pause, and I actually have to recess out of public session because we have the auditor coming to speak to us. So we're going to adjourn and take a little break. And then how long do you think we'll be on? 1:30. About 11:30, come back into public session. I apologize. Apparently this is the only time the auditor was able to meet with us. This does not, make this discussion go away. And Terry, I will call you. I'll call you. Is there anything more you'd like to add quickly before we have to recess? I'm sorry, I did not think this was going on. Yeah.
Understood.
Well, bring your earmuffs out.
It'd be cold.
Yeah, it's pretty chilly out there, but we'll talk, Terry.
Thank you all.
I apologize for doing this. This is I don't remember ever having to do this. And I thank everyone for coming in. And it is Friday, November 22nd, 10:54, and I call public session adjourned. Do I have a second?
Adjourned or recessed?
Recessed. I apologize, recessed.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Right, again, Friday, November 22nd, 11:34. I would like to call this meeting back from recess. This is public session. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, so Leanne has been so patiently waiting to share her monthly financial, what? I'm sorry.
Russ, I got
Actually, Russ has been more patient. Director's report from Russ Curtis. I think when I wrote Terry next to that, it made me skip over him. Okay.
Okay,
Second.
red flags. Areas that need improvement.
We can go with the technological one for that, right?
It's having to keep eating and if it's right in front of me.
Okay, first one. That's not quite framed, Dora. I don't know if you.
But it's framed online if that helps.
We have one staff vacancy in process of selection. The better news from that is that we have made 2 selections since the last meeting. Maura Wild has joined us as an ARC specialist. She's on staff now, and we're very pleased with that. We have another young lady who's starting December the 2nd, and she's going to be an administrative assistant for ARC. Actually, Maura helped to refer her, so that's very good news. And then
You get a finder's fee?
well, we haven't quite done that, but it's been whoa. But it's been very positive. And then we've got another person we interviewed that may work out. We're seeking a third candidate to, and then we'll be at full staffing based on what has been approved once that occurs. The next one is builder concerns. We've already talked about this issue. I'm not going to belabor it. That's going to require more discussion on how we're going to resolve this issue. The third one is it's come to my attention through observation that we've got an issue with the Overlook Lagoon. I think part of this might have been exacerbated when we had the recent unnamed cyclone number 8, whatever it was, that caused all the rain and problems and caused an algae bloom. This is a complicated issue. It is something that best we understand the the BHA owns, but it also interlocks with the other lagoons on the golf course. There's a relationship with the village, also with BHI Limited that have property very close to that area. So it's going to involve a lot of discussion. I've already had discussions with the gentleman who's involved with the Conservancy as well as the club about it. And we're working on some ideas on how we may be able to improve this issue. I spoke to the auditor about it, and I said, I think we're going to have to do something to improve this appearance over time to protect this valuable asset. So how we're going to deal with this after some further study is to consider how we may do this. It may involve an aerator or some other ways to deal with it. We don't quite have the answer yet, but we're studying it. And before we do anything, certainly the board's going to be informed on how we suggest going forward on this and what the best way to do this. We need to protect that asset going forward, though, whether it involves an aerator, skimmer, other methodologies to deal with it. But we want to keep that area clean if we can.
Russ, is there sorry to interrupt, is there like an average for the last 3 years cost that we budgeted for the either budgeted or spent, either budgeted or not, for the upkeep of the
best I understand, you correct me if I'm wrong, Leanne, we have not spent dollars on that. We have on the landing itself, but as far as the lagoon, it has not been an active area for spending. But it's something we do need to look at.
I would be careful. I would be careful with that because that lagoon handles treated sewage effluent on an overflow basis from the club pond on the 11th hole.
12, 12, isn't it?
Well, and that's something we're trying to clarify, Joe. I had a conversation with the manager and the superintendent at the club. And some of this is a bit uncertain, but they believe that the flow actually goes the other way. Obviously, we need to clarify all those things before we go too far or whatever we're going to do. But aeration might be a way to deal with this. It's a little bit too early to say. We have to look into it a bit further.
Hey, Russ, a couple things. What is Joe's point? This is effluent water. This is coming out of the waste treatment plant. And secondly, I mean, have we had a fish kill yet? Because the last time there was a algae bloom in one of our lagoons, there was a major fish kill. So
No, there has not been one. There was one at the club a few years ago. That is a risk. If you have certain oxygen levels that go down, that could be a risk.
Yeah,
we want to avoid that if we can.
Yeah, we probably had heat. Actually, it was not where the fish kill was in, we owned that lagoon, the BHA. The club cleaned it up for us, but it was not most of that lagoon is owned by the BHA that had the previous fish.
It's a complicated issue because the club has a part of those lagoons also currently. So.
Yeah, no, I know that. It was the BHA lagoon. It was most of that lagoon where there was a previous fish kill.
I raise this simply to let the board know that this is something we're going to study and try to determine the best course of action. It's not something we're just going to snap our fingers and deal with. We have to involve all the constituents in terms of awareness. And if there's issues that relate to those entities, we want to make sure they're on board with whatever we plan to do.
Hey, Russ, question for you. I know that the club uses quite a number of aerators in the lagoons. Do we have any sense of what one of those costs?
Yes. Estimations are if we had a couple of those, it'd probably be under $10,000, depending on what type you got. And now they make them that are solar powered, and you can apparently set them on timers, so you could turn them off in the late afternoon when the bird life comes in. So there's some possibilities we can look at, but we've got to do more study on it.
This is going to sound like sort of an absurd question, even as I'm saying it, but it's a serious one. If there is a fish kill, what do the alligators eat? And if the alligators can't eat fish, then they start going onto the land. And does that ultimately represent a risk to us if you got they can't
renegade
well, if they can't eat fish?
They like birds and turtles too. And they like coyotes and deer. They're not gonna come get us.
Dogs and kids.
Yeah. Well, Steve, the last fish kill was in a pretty big lagoon. Really? The one that we own on 7. That had no impact. The alligators did just fine. And they've got other stuff to eat. They can eat turtles.
Yeah. All these things can be looked into. They're legitimate questions as we proceed.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last red flag, the Corporate Transparency Act filings are due by year end. This is something that the government is moving forward with at this point. It may change next year with different administrations. We don't know, but as of now, this is what we must do. So you've all been sent information about that. It's something that we ask that you complete, and it is something that's necessary for us. And Leanne's working through that process as well. So we'll go ahead and get those filed. And
I had a thought on that. First of all, anybody running for the board ought to know that. And what happens if a board member says, I'm not doing it? For example, let's say we get a new board member and says, I'm not going to fill that out. Do we have to make that a requirement of being on the board? Well, obviously, it has to be a requirement of being on the board.
That is a good FYI for us to make sure Diane's letting, or you're letting all these candidates know.
I mean, all it is essentially providing your driver's license, but yeah, the penalties are so high that we cannot seat a board member if they're unwilling to do that.
That's right. And that could go away here, but for now, it's there and we all need to do it. And I did it the first day in the Senate.
Yeah, I don't have a problem doing it. I just,
Yeah, I made Joe involved.
it has to be in our somewhere that a requirement of the board member is to fulfill all appropriate rules and regulations. Anyway, if we don't have it, it's something we ought to think about for the next set of bylaws to make sure that we don't get caught in that weird situation. I can see people not wanting to do that.
okay. Well, I think we've received most of the board's information. There's a couple of board members who have not yet completed it, so we would ask you to do that if you've not done so.
Yeah.
Green flags, better news. The teamwork of the employees continues, still been strong. That's very important. One of the things we're looking at is the refreshed Allen report. This is something I've studied with Kim. I've talked to Paul, talked to Christine, talked to a friend of mine who works with our State Magazine as a sales executive to try to get a little context. I've had a couple of discussions with some prominent real estate folks on the island about how this works or doesn't work. Bottom line is we think the Allen report is getting stale and needs a refresh. So what we're planning to do on a go-forward basis is to look at this fresh eyes and look at something that's going to have high value, but looked at with better efficiencies and better effectiveness. So we're planning to go to a bi-monthly product with better value for the sponsors. Some of the things on the digital side is that they don't currently have the ability to have their companies linked. That's something we can put in and add value for them. The annual cost to them would be a little bit less than what they're paying now, so that's a good thing. Probably 80% of what they're currently paying on an annual basis. We would also recognize some efficiencies with Kim's time. We would have less printing, and we think this is going to be a win-win. So we're going to introduce this soon as part of the budget process and contact the sponsors to make sure they understand this is going to be going forward. So that's in the works. The budget assumptions we feel are realistic with actuals, and we think that they are conservative. They're not a slam dunk, but we do think they're achievable for 2025. So you'll hear more about this later. The search for the executive director is well underway. I know Christine's going to speak about this later and give you some estimates on some times. And the team individual goal development is in process. Dora and I have met with virtually all the staff. We've got a couple more to go that haven't met yet. And then we're going to do follow-up meetings also Monday and Tuesday with those that we've met with to try to finalize those goals for next year. The idea would be we would have a team goal for everybody to share in. And then also we would have other goals that they would work towards that would be a win-win. So something that would develop them in their own professional growth and also contribute to the BHA. So this is not, to my knowledge, been done, at least not in recent times, but this is something that will go towards incentives for the following year.
Can you give us the definition of SMART?
Yes.
Specific, measurable.
Measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound.
Because I read that and I went,
yes.
Wait a minute, this sounds familiar, but I can't remember it.
Yes, I mean, you want something that's not so subjective. You prefer to have some objectivity that it's either happened or it didn't happen. Okay. Anything else?
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. All right, Leanne, are you ready, my friend?
I'm ready. Let me get you your financials.
Okay.
Okay. Our income year to date through October is 1,612,781. Forecast is $1,655,635. The notes I have been the same notes. The interest income on the reserves is understated by $7,994, which is a good thing. The operating expenses October year to date is $1,113,672. The forecast is about 1.5. Total expenses are 8% below the year to date forecast. In case you're keeping track of it, the interim director's salary and the costs, except for travel, I believe, is under contingencies, and also the headhunter fee. I was putting them under consulting, and Russ and I talked about it and decided to get it was something that was hopefully wasn't going to come up next year. So it's contingency. So that's where you'll find those numbers. Please, God, don't let it happen.
No, it's not. Well, that's why we're paying extra special attention to it.
The reserves. Forecast for deposit to reserves is $195,864. And our October year-to-date expenses are $114,030. You have the balances of all our accounts for you to look at. The aging before. As you can see, all our percentages are in the 90s, some of them close to 100%. We've got some more in November this is the last payment of our quarterly payers are due. Some of them had paid and we're calling them. Other than that, we're looking good. It's almost all in the 90s, which is pretty good. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Leanne?
Thank you, Leanne, and I think I've said it before. Leanne's done a great job, and Russ probably helping Russ out through this process and has really stepped up.
Yeah. Wonderful job. All right. Thank you. And Leanne, do you have checks for me to sign today? Just for.
I think not.
Okay. All right.
Leanne did bring up that, are we gonna revisit the ARC language? Are we done with that one?
Okay. Yeah. We just need we'll have to come back to that. We needed that before then anyway. Okay, where are we at?
Budget.
2025, I've scribbled all over my page. Budget and key assumptions, Russ Curtis.
Okay, so I'll speak to this with the board, and want to thank Paul and Betty and Leanne and Finance Committee. We had an early meeting and talked through some of these things, but for the last 7 weeks or so, we've been working a lot on the budget, trying to determine what makes sense for the association going forward. I'm just going to share an overview of our overriding objectives in trying to do a budget. And that is, number one, to be a good steward of funds and the assessments. We want to serve our membership with respect and uphold community standards. We want to invest in the development and growth of our employee team, enhance programming and education about the ARC process, support the village values of living in harmony with nature, achieve a break-even or better budget, and contribute appropriately to those reserve funds for future BHA needs. That was what we were trying to accomplish in large part when we did the assumptions. So you all have a copy of the general assumptions of what we went forward with. On the revenue side, we tried to look at some trends. We looked at the recent history of where we were, where we are with growth in the community, consider all those things, and try to project what are the appropriate assessments that are going to drive to the support of all the expenses and the reserves we need to spend. The other thing we looked at were external factors, and we looked at the rate of inflation since the beginning of 22, which is the last time we had an assessment increase. Inflation nationwide has gone up 15%. We have not had any increase since that time. Well, as a general practice and suggestion for associations and clubs, it's better if you can have a modest increase on an annual basis. 3 to 5% usually keeps pace with inflation. If you don't do that, it becomes more of an event if you only do it every 3 or 4 years, and that's somewhat of what we're facing now. The other issue is that over time, if you defer modest increases, it reduces your ability to reinvest in the property for reserves. It reduces your ability to reinvest for staffing, for pay raises, as well as reinvest in technology and all those things that go into this. So that's just a general suggestion I would have for the board to consider for the future. For the assumptions in this budget, we based it on 1,190 improved lots, 700 unimproved lots, and we project a 4% assessment raise for 2025. In dues, yes, dues assessments. That's correct, Betty. So that's what went into that. We also put in a projection for prorated home assessments, which this board approved at a recent meeting. That's plugged in as well as an assumption for next year that we will capture a little bit of revenue from those homes that build and get the COs during the course of 2025. In terms of the operating expenses, some of the assumptions that were made there, The key assumptions, we projected staffing levels at the full staff levels that were either in the budget or approved by the board. That's in the budget and contemplated, as well as an ED for the entire year. So that's in there as a projection. Some of the other projections, I've already mentioned the issue with the Allen report. Those numbers are plugged in as a projection. We also recast the dollars for the drip line communities. That was a point of contention with some of the drip line communities, and we did that more on a cost basis calculation, which is going to result in an adjustment for the 2025 billings.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
Hey, Paul, I got some information from us. I'm still unclear, so I'd like to, outside of this meeting, be able to get clear again on what the resolution is with drip line communities and management fee.
We can talk about that certainly.
Yeah, outside of the meeting.
And one of the key points here.
Yeah, I mean, just that makes sense, but Russ calculated the error, Russ and Leanne, and then what we did was we took the amount of the error from last year's budget, and we then took that amount and funded the drip lines that were harmed by that. We funded their reserves, which will reduce their dues in the future. But we go over that number.
Okay, we'll go over that. Thank you.
Is that an executive session discussion or no?
No, you can do that outside.
All right. Yeah.
The other thing that's significant that is projected in this budget is the funding at 70% of the reserve study for 2025. And that's arrived at a couple of ways. Number one is projected in the 25 budget with a couple of exceptions, because there are two items that are projected in the 25 reserve study that we project will be funded this year, because we're having a surplus this year. So the surplus dollars intend to use with the board's approval to go ahead and reinvest in those reserves this year. And basically that helped to balance the budgets for both years, if that makes sense. At the end of the day, on the 24 projections, we came in within about $1,800 of the 24 budget, but still a positive break-even budget. And that's what was achieved. So these are high-level discussions. A lot more goes into this budget than what I've stated, but those are some of the key points. And I entertain any questions or suggest the board consider this for approval.
Okay, so you would like for someone to, go ahead then.
Oh, we didn't see anything to prove or?
It's been distributed previously as a summary, which is what you received previously.
It should be an email form, correct?
Yes, it is.
Russ, I'd emailed you this morning, I think, because I was unable to locate that.
Yes.
Do you not have it, Betty?
I've got a hard copy here, Steve.
Did you not try to email that again?
I forwarded this morning before we started.
I've seen the assumptions memo.
Oh, yeah, I don't have that one.
Yeah, I was making a
Yeah.
spreadsheet
Yeah,
there.
that's the one I don't have to forward. I only have the assumptions under my
Okay.
inbox.
Yeah, I've not received a spreadsheet on that previously.
Yeah, I don't
Hey,
Yes.
Russ, what?
Go ahead.
Obviously, approving a budget today makes it easier, but if we approve it at a meeting in December, what impact does that have on you?
Well, Paul, it's expected, as I understand the covenants, that it has to be approved 30 days prior to the fiscal year, which puts us at the end of November. In addition to that, you've got a 4% assessment change. So to make the community aware is also identified in the language in the covenants as I read them.
Could we meet that need in theory by you moving forward, assuming this is an acceptable budget? But could we actually have the time to see the numbers and just review it?
Well, is there a hybrid path we can take that would serve both goals? That we move and approve the framework, we move and approve the increase, so the assumptions, framework, and increase, We do that all today. And then we meet and vote at a future meeting on the fine details of the budget. Does that work?
That, you know what, that, I mean, that really doesn't do anything different than just deferring the approval, right? I guess procedurally, I don't care here. What I do care about is if everyone isn't comfortable, if they felt they haven't seen all the numbers, then we should clear it off. It actually gives us, what, 8 days? We could probably get into, I mean, I think it'd be worthwhile to make sure everyone's 100% comfortable with the budget, Russ. If we get the numbers out to everybody, they can ask questions, we can approve it either by a quick special meeting that beats the deadline or not. I don't want, unless everyone 100% feel like they've been able to review it, I don't think we should approve it.
Paul, I have been communicating with Russ. I have a lot of specific questions and he's been very helpful, but I would really appreciate a couple days to go through the numbers.
One thing we could do if the board saw fit is there could be a motion to approve the 4% increase, as well as the assumptions,
Yeah.
and then as far as the actual framework or the detailed summary budget, that could be reviewed as long as that's done before the end of the month. That's right. We either have a vote by email or way to deal, make sure that's concurrent.
Yeah. So Russ just, I like that idea. Russ just handed me the bylaws, and they do provide that we are required to have a budget prepared at least 30 days before the beginning of each fiscal year. So we're in a constraint for this.
I know, but we need to be able to.
No, I agree with that too.
Well, that's fine. That's a good resolution right there.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's fine. Obviously, if people have issues and we want to change it, we now with December 1st. Going with that process is fine, but
We're all sure it's fine. It's just, it's fine with everybody putting their eyes through the entirety of it. And, yeah, we'll go ahead and make a motion and we'll pass it with the motion stating that we need to get the email vote in this coming week because we need to be a month.
so we have 10 days.
Okay.
Well, let's, how about we start with, I'll move to approve the 4% requested increase in assessments and move to approve the framework and assumptions of the budget that we've seen.
Yeah, and that we will take a vote by email
Yes.
on what date?
On the summary budget,
On the detailed budget. And I would suggest if anybody has an objection or a major concern that could change a number, that you please, in communicating with Russ, communicate to the whole board.
Can we go to next Friday or do you not like that date right up to November 29th? No, we don't want to do that.
We weren't here November.
When's December 1st?
That's a Sunday. I think.
You could do Sunday.
you could do Wednesday of next week. You do it early. And,
The day before Thanksgiving?
yeah, you don't have much choice.
Yep. All right,
All right.
let's do that. Let's do
right.
Wednesday.
Well, then why are we doing this motion today?
Well, can we just pass that? We can go ahead and move that.
That's 3 business days.
Oh.
I'd rather leave it open if somebody we go through the numbers and question the 4%, and we haven't locked ourselves into that. I mean, we're talking about 3 days, 2 days.
We also be able to-
But we would have to call, here's the thing though, we'd have to call a special meeting, or we'd have to do this by email, and that would require unanimity. And so as long as we're gonna get unanimity, great. Otherwise, then we can vote on the motion to at least get the framework and the increase baked in. And then all we're doing is just focusing on the fine details.
You could call a special meeting Wednesday at 9:30 a.m.
Right.
by Zoom.
Exactly.
And Sole purpose.
All right, why don't we do that? Why don't we plan a meeting at 9:30 Wednesday morning?
But if everybody's okay, we can then just ignore that meeting and do it by unanimous consent, correct?
Well, I think the point is if people need to apply themselves to the review, and I would
Okay.
say that the comments you have moved forward by Monday.
Okay, that's fine.
Deal with it. And then we do some kind of a.
I need a motion to do a special meeting. I just have it written for me.
You want to do an email vote or do you want to do a Zoom meeting on
Let's just
Wednesday?
do Zoom and knock it out and.
All right,
Steve can-
9:30?
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Sorry for being a little particular about this, but I don't like being rushed on
Fine.
when I'm on the other side of a trip, when I'm asking to approve something that I have questions about. So I would rather everyone who has questions, Steve and Betty, Rachel, have those answered before we take any vote today. So sorry, that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
Fair enough, thank you. All right, any other questions about that? We're good to go. We're gonna move on to doing that on Wednesday, 9:30 in the morning, Zoom call. Dora will set that up.
Hey, Dora, could I get a printed copy? My printer doesn't print with
So,
highlights.
Betty, I will give this to you. Because I've got a printer at
Oh, okay.
at home.
Never mind, he's gonna give me it. By the way, congratulations to all the staff that has worked so hard. This is probably the first time they've been engaged, and I know it was a little stressful trying to accomplish this, but congratulations to the staff and for us to put this together.
Work hard on it.
I agree. I echo that statement.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we are moving on to BHI Ferry Transportation Update Docket A-401 sub 23. Mr. Steve Smalley.
And can I talk about this for 30 seconds, including, start with a request that we remove this from further, standing.
We have schedules now, so I think we're ready for that.
Yep.
Right, so, I think this will be the final report on this item that, schedule's been passed by the hybrid quote unquote schedule, been passed by the Utilities Commission. Limited intends to, implement that December 1st, which I guess is next Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And what I will say, as we were crunching all the numbers to get to here, is it is definitely a reduction in service, is a reduction in capacity. There are irreconcilable blockages on, in particular, Thursdays and Saturdays. So for those individuals here or playing on the home game, do you come up on Thursday afternoon or Saturday for a chunk of the afternoon? Get here early, make a reservation, because otherwise they'll be bumped.
Is there tram constraints? Is that what's causing it?
No, it's because they're reducing service in peak times.
Oh.
So
You
they're
can
going
take a look
from,
at
they're
this,
going
yeah.
from 3 boats to 2 during times when the ridership is actually at a pretty high level. So they're all in a deficit situation during peak season anyway, and that's going to exacerbate the deficit now.
There was a communication that went out that indicated something about reservations for the contractor ferry. Do you know what that is?
They are not doing reservations for the contractor ferry generally. What they're doing is they're going to have some boats that are going to be kind of rebranded that are currently contractor ferries that are reservationless. They're going to rebrand those as passenger ferries.
Oh.
So the reservations will be available on them.
Oh. I thought they were doing something to help the contractors get space.
No, the contractor ferry wasn't, the schedule wasn't touched for that one, but what they're doing is they're trying to say, all right, we were already running a contractor boat. We're just going to call it a passenger ferry now.
Oh.
Well, yeah,
There's
there's another part of that, Steve. Limited proposed to cut the passenger ferries in the morning. So you couldn't get off the island with bags until like eight or so in the morning. And that was not going to work because people do like to leave early. So the they would not move on that. But the exact times might be wrong. But so the compromise was they agreed to do package handling on some of the ferries that Steve referenced. So you could leave early in the morning with bags. If not, so that was a compromise because so basically all they're doing is adding luggage carriers onto and they'll handle the luggage on those early rebranded ferries.
Right, and Paul is correct on that. I mean, Betty, it's good in the sense that we got half a load, but we're still having fewer boats during that.
Yeah, but I mean, that is good news.
Yeah, it was
Yeah. Okay.
And they'll be watched over the year, and you'll still be paying attention to how things are going.
Yeah, and I should also say that we built in as part of the settlement periodic reviews, so that built into the Utilities Commission's approval is also the requirement that Limited meets with us and the other constituent entities, review this periodically to see how it is. And if it starts to go sideways, then we can reopen the situation.
Okay.
Yeah, one last thing, if I could, Steve. You mentioned Thursdays and Saturdays. Those were never good days to travel before. They were going to be worse days to travel now. They're basically planning on there are going to be a lot of bumps, and there'll be bumps. And the next question is, why would the village entities agree to that? This negotiation got to a point where what the village, the association, and the club wanted to make sure there would not be a regular set of bump boats would not be agreed to by Limited. And then the assessment was made from people who know these folks at the Utility Commission, if we went into a conflict with them, was going to side with Limited, and we would lose and maybe lose worse. So if you hear somebody say, why was this ever agreed to? I think the consensus was this was the best we could do. It is not what we meaning people who live on the island would have preferred, and it's going to cause some inconveniences, but it's the best we could get. Again, is that fair, Steve?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And we knew, we being everyone, knew that from the moment that Limited proposed this, that there would have to be reductions because they were going to get some reductions regardless. Like if nobody opposed and they get exactly what they want, if everyone opposes, then they're still going to get some of what they want. So I think that all told, roughly we got about 75%, they got about 25%.
Let me ask something here relative to our role in communications. Is there something we should be doing to get a special notice out to our members saying, just, okay, it's coming, it's December 1, here is the schedule, is there something that we should be doing to help people deal with this?
We've done that.
I know.
We got it.
Okay.
Didn't we, I thought she made mention. Actually, yeah.
It was like,
I guess-
and the link schedule were the last several compasses. We just keep putting that as a recurring item.
I'm just saying, rather than putting them into a compass which has tons of
other
stuff in it,
information.
how about just a blurb that goes out that just says, hey, new schedule coming up. I appreciate that it's in the compass,
Yeah.
but it's like,
Yeah.
people keep saying, well, what day is it in effect?
That's why, you know,
Just a special,
You can just put out a single purpose compass.
yeah, just a, hey, here's a notice, you know, big change coming,
Yeah.
just pay attention. That's all I'm suggesting. Anyway, done.
But that's, you know, we always want to look out for the members.
Agenda next time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, okay, because I was thinking. I can't be.
Okay.
All right, so no more questions for Steve. We're gonna shut the door on that for a while. Unless there's something else to bring to you. Next, search status for our new executive director. I can tell you that I just received Russ and I an email from Brad from Coughlin, Kugler and Wallace. He's our search and consulting executive. He updated us, letting us know that they are receiving some great candidates and are vetting them now. The position remains open for a few more weeks. On December 20th, the search committee will Zoom to go over candidate binders. And then on the 7th of January, that'll be the first day of in-person interviews, which will be rotating people in and out. And that'll be about 4 to 5 candidates. And then on the 14th, that'll be the final interviews. And I think Steve and Betty joined myself. Russ is kind of hand-holding us through it. And we've got Slaughter, Fitzhugh and Suzanne O'Brien as part of our search team. It's a great little committee. We're excited. We were excited when he touched base with us yesterday. And it was basically, I just want to relook at those dates to make sure nothing's changed and everything's all right. And it was just a quick, everything's good. Happy Thanksgiving.
Are we going to be able to sit together on the 20th as, you know, again, as colleagues to go through this?
Is this an
This is
in-person
the
meeting
first
or?
Well, you can. I mean,
I
if you
just-
want,
I just think, you know, it would be good to be able to be in the same room and
It's after the board
Your
meeting,
people's time.
and some may be
Yes,
Zoom,
3
but
o'clock.
it can be done if somebody's present too.
yeah, but I'm just asking,
Yeah,
how do we
okay.
know for the most part we'll be together here?
yeah, I would, I probably, as long as I could go run and take care of my dogs real quick. I can
We have
come back.
a board meeting in the morning. and then-
Yes.
On the
Okay.
20th?
That's why I thought,
20th,
yeah,
yeah.
that's why I thought it was so convenient because he really liked that day. And I was like, you know what?
Oh, you're kidding.
It's a long day, but,
All right, so are Suzanne and Slaughter on island?
Slaughter's probably gonna have to Zoom in. And then, Suzanne will make it. She'll be here.
Okay,
She'll be here.
all right, so could we get a meeting, something or other out?
Like a Zoom
I don't like-
invite thing, just in case people need to do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine. I already got it on the list.
That is helpful. It goes automatically when you accept that to your calendar, and I really like that.
It is wonderful.
And
And on the
We-
7th?
we have other meetings scheduled. Can we just send out invites on that to just put it on there and reserve the space?
The 7th?
Yeah, I wrote it out. That's a good idea. So we'll go
We need
over
to get
this.
it.
Yeah, I'll say if you go over that schedule with me, I'll just do them all in one
Okay.
shot and you guys
That
can have
sounds
it on your calendar.
The one thing I did want to mention is Slaughter and I are both off-site on the 14th.
Yep.
I'm going to be in a car, but, can we, you know, can we still participate
Of course.
via?
You'll have
Zoom?
everything. You'll have everything before.
Yeah, I may just have an earpiece.
That's great. Just be careful
All right.
driving. I don't want to be worrying about you. But,
I think that's the one meeting that I know he and I said we were not available.
yeah, you'll,
Are those January meetings contingent on having candidates still?
Oh, I'm assuming we're okay. Sounds like they've got a lot.
it really is.
Viciously when they don't want us.
Yeah, when we talked to Brad, I was very clear on you have got to drive home the fact that this person will be taking a ferry every day unless he buys a home on this island and that it's cold and it's hard and you miss a ferry, so, really scare them.
And this is the one with the spouses, right? The 20th? This is the candidate plus their spouse.
That would be, no.
20th, no, I mean the
No, that's
14th of
seniors.
December,
The 14th of January.
January, 14th of January, it's with the spouse. And that's the one that Slaughter and I would just have to do it on Zoom.
And that's fine.
Okay,
That's
all
fine.
right.
I mean,
It's January 7th, January 14th.
7th.
I'll just add it to my calendar now.
yeah, and Dora will go over that. We'll have to get the times to you on that as well.
That's the round robin.
Okay, no, just make sure I come down.
All right, any questions about that? We're really excited, I think, you know, the fact that he's kind of scaring people away and we still got 4 to 5 that have already responded is pretty cool. All right, also.
Quick question. We have monies in the 2025 budget for relocation and all that other stuff, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and then also just wanted to update, I think the 26th is the last day of this month for people to write in, to be a candidate to petition. And I don't know if we've gotten any additional ones, but we do have our candidate forum, hosted by our amazing Russ here. And there's questions being formulated and everyone will get the same question. And then it will shift one person down, so not the same person's answering first every time.
Do we have the opportunity to pose questions? I mean, are we asking for questions? How are we getting questions to Rob?
Okay, I can maybe,
Can
I speak?
Yeah.
no.
An overview would be each candidate, and this we share with the candidates beforehand. Each candidate would have up to 3 minutes per answer. At the 2-minute 30 mark, if they're still speaking, the candidate would be given a 30-second alert. At the 3-minute mark, I would say time is up and I'd move to the next candidate. Direct engagement from candidate to candidate would not be permitted. It's not a debate. And I would rotate the sequence so that the first person to answer one question would not answer the next question, in other words. Total time is expected roughly 75 minutes, about 6 questions each. The forum would be recorded and transcribed. The responses would be made available for BHA members to read after the forum. So the questions are not going to be revealed in advance. Those will be something I'm working on. I've got already input on those, and I think they're framed. But if you, yeah, if there are any inputs on that separately, let me know.
Yeah, my question was, are we going to solicit any questions?
You can let me know, Betty, if you've got thoughts on that, and I'll be happy to listen.
I think the team members here have done a fantastic job of coming up with questions that they think are good, just because they go through this all the time.
You want to solicit questions from the board?
If you'd like to send me something, I'll consider it. But I've already got a general framework, but
okay,
this will be something that will be shared, and to each candidate be the same question, basically.
Yeah, I know. But I also wanted to ask something else. We touched on it last time. This issue of the candidates being able to communicate with our members was an issue last year. You know, we have limited means for people to reach out to members because we restrict our address list. And in addition to that complication, we have others on the island who have very large distribution lists who use that to promote their view. And I feel that in running an election, everybody who's running should have equal access. And I realize we don't want to give out any address lists, but I would suggest that we as a board adopt the opportunity for all candidates to write a message, put out a blurb, whatever, and it goes through the HOA and is distributed via their email list, so we're not sharing it, but that we don't short circuit the ability for candidates to reach our full membership. And I think we need to talk about it.
So we'll have the forum, we have the candidate questionnaire that they'll put in the Compass. Last year, we actually did end up doing a blurb for everyone to go out, and we're happy to do that, in my opinion. So far as other homeowners, members, business people on the island, we cannot stop them from doing.
I realize that.
Yeah, okay.
I realize
I just
that,
wanted to
but-
make sure you weren't asking that we.
No, I'm not,
Okay,
you know, we know who that is and what that is, but what I am saying is, I think that we should designate at least 2 opportunities for these candidates to submit their thoughts and have the HOA publish it. And I know last year, I mean, I took to the airwaves in terms of some of the Facebook pages, but I don't think we should make it difficult for the candidates to reach our members. I think we should facilitate it. And I'd like to see at least 2 opportunities in writing for candidates to say, hey, here's some of my thoughts I want to share, and have the HOA provide that vehicle.
Yeah, I believe we did that last year.
We did it
Yeah.
once as a result of the controversy
Yeah.
you know, we didn't do it up front, and I think we should do it.
Well, there
upfront.
was the thing up front with in the annual report, the candidate statements, when their photos are all in there, it's like a half
I
a
know.
page.
I know,
And then that's what was linked to like the voting ballot, I think.
I know
And then
that.
forum will be,
I am
saying-
asking to give them 2 opportunities to write an article of their own interest in terms of what they want to say to the candidates, and that we publish it. I think it's only fair.
Or as long as it's fair if everyone has an equal opportunity, of
No
course.
issue with any of this.
That's what I'm saying. Create equal opportunity.
Right.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
yeah, I don't think, I mean, unless somebody online has an issue with it, I think that, yeah, if you
And
just. shoot an
maybe
email
you can pick 2 dates and say, hey, if you got something you wanna be sending out, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
But
I mean,
think-
potentially you could do it, if you're already sending out the summary of the forum as one,
Yeah.
you could
that's-
set a second date of say December
No,
15th,
I'm saying 2 opportunities.
if I may. You could give the candidates an opportunity to write another short paragraph or something they want to get across. They're all compiled and they're sent at the same time to the association.
Right,
members.
I'm saying you do that twice, not just the 3 questions we gave them, but you give them 2 opportunities during the month from November 26th to the voting, which goes out it goes out the end of December. So they may want to put one out before it goes out, and they may want to put one out in January, but I think they need 2
It will likely go out
opportunities.
before that. It has to go out by the 26th. It will likely go out before that,
What will go out before that?
the proxies. They usually go out by the middle.
The annual packet that has everything in it,
Can't go out before, like 26th of what?
December.
Yeah, I'm saying that. I'm saying, the 26th of this month, everybody has to have their application in. They then become part of the process. December, we've got a candidate forum. I'm saying between the candidate forum and whenever voting takes place. Yeah, the proxies go out on the 26th, but some people don't even pick up their mail until after the first of the year. But that they have 2 opportunities to share their thoughts, you know? And then we facilitate it and we get it to all of our membership. Thank you.
All right,
One comment on that. I think that needs to be controlled by Russ or somebody, because you're going to find a situation where, I spend 3 days and send out 4 pages and you're too busy to write anything. And that may or may not reflect your view or the candidate's view or the association's view.
I totally agree. I'm just suggesting that we set up a schedule, we manage it, Russ and Dora will manage it, but that we notify the candidates that they will have access to the membership, and this is how they will have access. It's up to them to submit.
all right, any other comments, about the candidate forum or anything relative to that?
How many candidates do we have?
6, 5?
5 at the moment.
5 at the moment.
Can you tell us who the 5 are?
Well, we put forward 3.
There's
Right.
the 3 that we put forward. I want to, Tiffany, what is Tiffany's last name?
Right?
And,
It's Vicky and Derek and
Bill Bourne.
Bill
Bill.
Bourne, gosh, he
Yes.
would have killed me if I didn't. Is this
Okay.
recorded? Oh, no.
Tiffany and Joel. Do we have another one? We have 6.
Diane has the last one,
Hmm?
but there is 5. Diane has the name of the last one. I don't know
All right.
right now.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, note to everybody that the 26th is that last day to get everything in. If you're going to sign yourself up. Well, we're not quite done, so I'm going to make a motion to adjourn public session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, third.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, it is 12:28. We are closed. Um,